Good morning, Ben. I hope you had a great week. Let's go right to the debate. The only poll I've seen, NBC Post, says Ron DeSantis won the debate. 33% of those who watched, 17% thought Nikki Haley. Everyone else was below that. Don't know, don't care came in ahead of number three. I think it's because it was a mess. Your assessment of Wednesday night's debate?
Well, I think that the debate suffered from a number of different things. First off, I think that, the RNC's decision to include Jorge Ramos's co-host from Univision was a huge mistake. It was a total waste of time, asked questions that I think were, no different from what you would have gotten from your average MSNBC representative. And frankly, questions that didn't need to be directed at presidential candidates based on, the different policies in question. The other thing is, this is a Fox Business debate. Obviously, I'm a Fox contributor. I, love Stuart Varney. I get along with Dana Perino. I like all my colleagues, and that kind of thing. I felt like a Fox Business debate should be focused primarily on business and on the economy and on Bidenomics and how we're going to dig our way out of the hole that we're in, after 4 years of the kind of approach that they've had to this economy and to the inflationary problems. People can't afford to, buy a new car or buy a new house, and that's something that's a huge problem. And the fact is that I think that, unfortunately, at the end of the debate, I believe Bidenomics was only mentioned twice, and it was not something that was really a focus of the debate. I think that we needed more of that. And when it came to the actual performances, look, I agree with that general assessment, though I do think that, it was interesting that Tim Scott got as much airtime as he did. One of the big problems for Nikki is that she really needs Tim Scott to be out by the time that they're voting in South Carolina for her to have any shot of consolidating support and coming in, second or first, winning the state. And unless that happens, and happens, well before the actual voting starts, then she's got a problem. And so,
Ben, on your comments, I applaud having Univision there. I do not applaud having Democratic questions like, why are you so mean to the LGBT community asked? And I just think it's absurd.
Can I be a little bit more specific about this? So you have a Colombian representative on the stage there. I'm Puerto Rican. My friends in the Cuban and in the Chicano community are the people that Republicans should be targeting in terms of the Hispanic voters that are gettable for them. They've maxed it out in the Cuban community. It's why Florida looks the way that it does. And so you would prefer to have somebody who comes from Arizona, New Mexico, a western part of Texas, on the debate stage asking questions that are related to those communities because their priorities are very different. And so it's something that I just think it's kind of a blind spot. I think that the RNC just sort of said, well, yeah, let's just throw Univision up there and it can be anybody. And
I think they were counting on Fox Business doing a better job of quality control in the questions, but that was a lot of wasted time. Let me move to a couple of other issues that are big. First of all, we had our House Oversight Committee, first oversight hearing on impeachment. Turns out that $250,000 was sent to Hunter Biden, with the home address being listed as President's house in Delaware. Now, let you who have not received $250,000 from Beijing wire transfer firm cast the first stone. What do you think about that, Ben?
Well, I made a joke maybe a month ago on this show saying, well, we shouldn't expect at the end of the day to have, a check that says, to Joe Biden from China for cash. But that's basically what we got here. And it's one of these things where, look, I understand that, people can make all the excuses that they want on the Democratic side, but it looks very bad. And the voters and the indications that we have from poll numbers are clearly showing that people believe that Joe Biden did something unethical or, potentially illegal within this context. Now, the question politically, because impeachment is a political decision, is whether, Republicans want to go down this road. And I think that Jonathan Turley was, right to sort of pump the brakes on this a little bit in the questions that he was asked and say, look, this is an inquiry. I'm not saying that, we've seen enough to qualify for impeachment yet. Personally, I think we have, but that's a difference of opinion. And I think that one of the things that they're going to have to deal with is basically, do you want to take up the people's time and the time of the Congress focused on this as a political tactic, knowing what the outcome is going to be in the Senate.
Now, Ben, we've got a warehouse of evidence that Hunter Biden broke many laws. I don't know that we have anything other than the president lying about not talking about business with his son to connect up all these wire transfers to the president. It is possible, really, that it's got nothing to do with the president. I'm open to being proven wrong, but I don't think there's no evidence. There's a lot of evidence of funny money going to Team Biden, but we don't know what the president's role is. Isn't that like the best argument for an inquiry?
So I think that that is a great argument for an inquiry, and I think that there are examples, by the way, historically of impeachments, including Judge English from back in the 1920s, where he never personally profited financially from the different money that was flowing through a banking system fraud scheme that he and others dreamt up, and in fact, it required the employment of his son. By the way, I'm happy to talk about that case. I'm planning to write about it next week. But it's one of these things where the thing that is, I think, really important to establish is any kind of situation where this funds, this distribution of funds and resources to Hunter and via him to the family and his friends led to a material change in U.S. policy. And to me, that's the thing that actually needs to be demonstrated. Because if
all right, now I have an objective,
Joe.
yeah, that is where they need to go. Objective debate question. If I were king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, I'd say you have to have 20% in a national poll or 10% in either Iowa or New Hampshire to get in. That would limit the stage to 4 people if you round up 9.8% average for Christie in New Hampshire. And that those 4 people are DeSantis, Haley, Christie, and the former president. What do you make of that rule as a cutoff?
First off, I like that rule. I think these debates need to get smaller, and they need to get smaller fast. You don't have the wasted time, but you also, I think, can give people more time to answer questions in that scenario. And that's really what we need. I mean, it's ridiculous that we have these artificial limits on the amount of time people can spend answering very complex questions, and whether that's about healthcare or education or China or what they're going to do, when it comes to our overall foreign policy picture, which is an absolute mess. It is something that I think we need to hear. And so, look, I'm all in favor of that. I think that, we need to move toward that and move toward it quickly in order to be able to have a serious conversation. But I also think that requires, a heightening of the standard from the RNC, side of things, that I think there's pressure to keep this from consolidating for a number of reasons, and it's mostly from supporters of the former president.
Is the Vivek Boomlet over? I mean, the TikTok answer, which was not an answer, I did express some dismay at, and I have no idea if he took Chinese money. I have no idea if his company had Chinese money. But I do think the air might be out of that balloon. What do you think, Ben Domenech?
I think that this was a flash in the pan candidacy, and I think that a lot of people, like the flash, but then I think people are actually, voters are pretty astute. And if you get out in front of them with this stuff for a while, they eventually cotton on to the idea that, hey, there's something, this seems a little squirrely, And the other thing is, really, people want to win. They want to win so much, Republican voters. And that's one of the reasons why in that Club for Growth New York Times piece, which I don't know if you've referenced yet on the show, but it's one of these things where they went down and they tried all these different messaging tactics when it came to the ad campaigns that they were running. And the number one thing that worked was talking to former Trump supporters and saying, I'm worried about winning this time around. And that, to me, I think is the thing that really is the strongest message against any kind of flash-in-the-pan candidacy, especially someone who's never demonstrated the ability to win, who, again, wasn't even voting until just a couple of years ago. And I think that that's something that, for GOP voters right now, they don't want to accept that. They don't want to try, and roll the dice on this stuff. They want to win because they think it's extremely important.
Ben, last question, sort of personal. President Biden went down to Arizona to give a speech about John McCain, your former father-in-law, or your father-in-law who's passed, and ended up just spending it attacking people and being incoherent. What do you make of that?
Well, I thought the speech was gross, and I thought that the fact that he, used an opportunity that's supposed to be about unity and bipartisanship to send such a partisan message was completely tonally out of touch. And I'll tell you one more thing, Hugh. They are using taxpayer dollars from the American Relief Plan, which was supposed to help people come back after COVID for, I believe it's $83 million for this library. That's not something that I support. It's not something that my wife supports. We don't think that this is something that should be done with taxpayer money, and we think that John would not have liked it because, as you know, he, whatever you believe of his ideology, he was a strong fiscal conservative. He fought earmarks. He fought pork. And I think that that's something that, is not the kind of thing that we should be doing with federal taxpayer dollars.
You know, if he was channeling in, he was saying, "Send the attackums yesterday, Joe." That's what he'd be. I think he'd be saying that.
Absolutely.
Ben Domenech, thank you for joining me.